Hello, WVS teachers. This training is going to be in regards to low effort, high impact, accessible content tips for all learners. So with the kickoff of the 24-25 school year, I really wanted to focus in on accessibility with all of you. Being that many of you do not create content for your courses, but you are really maybe adding pieces in or sending emails or different pieces like that, I want to share with you ways that you can keep accessibility in mind in regards to making sure anything that you create, anything that you're sending out is accessible to all. They all can gain access to it. So I'm going to talk about that in the next couple slides and presentation. And again, you are watching this recorded, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Larissa Zampoulis, with any specific questions, or if you would like to go through any of this with me. So again, my name is Larissa Zampoulis. I am the Associate Director for Special Populations at Wisconsin Virtual School, and I work with many of you in regards to accommodations and modifications, but I have a true passion for accessibility within online learning specifically, and I want to share with you today. So the outcomes that I have for us today are participants will be guided through a focused set of tips that provide low effort, high impact accessibility practices that benefit all learners, not just learners with an IEP, 504, or other specific needs. Participants will apply accessibility practices to provide a Google Doc, and you'll be able to try some of those things out. And if you're looking for how these are connected to NSQ and QM standards, you can see here that they are connected to Core Standard E, Accessibility and Usability, as well as Standard F, Diverse Instruction. So I know that we are doing this recorded, but before we get started, I want you to just think about accessibility and what is your familiarity or comfort level with designing either content or a document and making sure that it's accessible for all. So just on your own, think about that. 1, meaning maybe you're just starting your journey on it. 2, you've dabbled a little bit but might need additional support. 3, you've made some really great efforts and made some great improvement, but you can still learn some more. And 4, you've gone all the way to the top. You feel like you are an expert in this. So for those of you that may be new on this journey, let's talk about what accessibility is. Accessibility gives all people the same access to learning, services, and information. This applies to any individual, whether they have a disability or not. And another important element is the ease of access for students who need these features and accommodations. They can benefit all students when proactively designed learning environments are accessible. So thinking about any of those pieces that we create on our own, documents, emails, any of those pieces, how are they accessible to all learners, even if we're not aware that they may need those specific accessibility options? Now, when we think of it from a digital side, digital accessibility or web accessibility means that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. And you can look at the Web Accessibility Initiative, WAI, for more information. And the slides have been provided to you in the large slide deck, and you can click on any of these links there. Can this technology or content be used effectively by people with disabilities as those without disabilities? So when we think about that, we have to think about a wide variety of people and different obstacles that they may face. When we are accessing or sharing something to someone, can everyone access this? Are we giving everyone an equal opportunity? And we might not always know, but we need to be thinking about that as much as we can. And then if needing to make a change, open to making that change so that all can access those items or content items. So again, this is coming from a WVS teacher perspective as much as possible. Keeping in mind things you can change in the items that you are specifically sharing or creating to students and families, those are the items that you should be keeping in mind right now. I am aware that many of the items within our courses you do not create and do not change, but there are things that you do add in or share out to students or even build within your courses, like your landing page, that we need to keep in mind of, are they accessible, or what we're putting in there makes sense for all of our learners. So some examples, like I mentioned, are buzz landing pages, welcome letters, emails, not the one sent from Genius, but just your own specific emails that you send out, even to coaches. So let's dig in, low effort, high impact tips, and we're going to get started. So the accessibility tips that I have for you today are broken into 5 different categories: text, links, images, chunking, and closed captioning. And a lot of these things are things that you have control over. So I just want to bring these to your attention and really give you some easy tips that you can implement tomorrow, but are really low effort and make a high impact for all learners. And do keep in mind, when I go through this may be overwhelming to you if this is new, but I don't want you to feel like you have to do everything in this presentation tomorrow. Pick one thing that you can improve upon and that you want to make a change in, and then try to embed that as you go. Don't go back and redo everything that you've already done, because that can be daunting and overwhelming, and that may deter you from making those changes. But start small and pick something, and I'll talk about that as we go today as well. So the first one we're going to start with is text and the accessibility around that. So the first way that we can create accessibility in text is through paragraph styles and headers. So when we're creating a Google Doc, which is what many of us use for additional material or sharing out information to students, is in a Google Doc, even in our welcome letters, right? And when we are creating a Google Doc, many times instead of creating like a title at the top of our page, we just increase the size of our text instead of actually going in to the paragraph styles and selecting title. The reason why this is so important is if a student is using a screen reader and the screen reader is coming through, it does read differently when we have those titles and subtitles and paragraph headers established within the document compared to just changing the font size. So if you see this link here, you can go in and learn more about how to set those and set your own specific ones that you like for your documents. And another thing to keep in mind is that normal paragraph text should be at least 12 point. I know sometimes when we're squeezing things on a page, we tend to go smaller, but we really want to keep that 12 point in mind. So as we go to size here, heading should be 24. Subheadings like header 2 through header 4, 18. And that paragraph style, like I said, should be at least 12 to 14, depending on what you are using and who your students are. Types of fonts. As teachers, we love our fonts. We love to be creative in the fonts that we use, but we also need to keep in mind which fonts may actually be a barrier to our learners. The sans serif family, and you can do just a simple Google search and it will tell you which ones are in the sans serif family, but Arial, Comic Sans are ones that are very much accessible to learners and are dyslexic friendly. So just keep those in mind as you are choosing those styles. When we use unique styles, it can be a barrier to learners. And also choose 1 or 2 fonts for consistency. It really reduces that cognitive load and allows learners to process it better instead of using multiple fonts throughout your document. So text, emphasis, and color. Again, we love emphasis as teachers. So sometimes when we are trying to get a point across, we will bold, we will highlight, we will underline. And when we're doing that, we are actually distracting from our message. Not only that, but these pieces, such as underline, are used in different ways and can mean different things to learners that are really heavily relying on those in regards to accessibility. What I mean by that is underline typically means a link. So when we are using that in another way, that can really distract from what that meaning is. So using bold and italics sparingly and effectively and avoiding that underlining. So really focus in on what your main message is and only bold the items that you really need bolded. Another way to emphasize different text is putting in the word important or note for the heads up and information. Ensure contrast when using unique color combinations. Like you see here, I'm using black text on a white background, easy for us to read and see the text. You are always welcome to use a color contrast checker, especially when we're creating slideshows. That's when I see it the most, is that sometimes the cool fonts and the cool colors that are added in there, or even in Canva templates, sometimes they aren't accessible. So we really want to keep that in mind. Even though they look fun and inviting, are they really accessible to our learners, and thinking about what that may look like for a learner. Avoiding using color is the only way to convey meaning. When you are putting specific text in color, especially when we use green and red, which happens a lot because it can mean positive and negative, that can really be difficult for learners to actually notice that text. If they have a color blindness, which you may not be aware of, especially that red and green is really difficult for learners to see. And so they may be missing that indication altogether. So putting an asterisk or bolding it or somehow noting it in a different way is really important so that you're not heavily relying just on that color. If you're looking for more information about fonts, color contrasting, and document accessibility, I encourage you to check out the links below as well. All right, the next category we're going to move on to is links. Links are a way that we share information. We do this through emails, documents, on our landing pages with our Zoom links. We communicate information through links. Many times what I actually see is people copy and pasting the link and putting it in the email. That is an easy way to do it, right? But we really want to avoid using a full URL as part of an online document or page or way to share information, is because if someone is using a screen reader, and a screen reader is primarily used for someone that cannot visually see text on a screen or on the paper, but can be used in a variety of different ways as well. But when the screen reader comes through, it's going to read every part of that URL. And that can be very overwhelming, and it's not always easy to skip. So sometimes this may not be possible. Sometimes, like in Genius, I'm well aware when you are using that Genius template, it's going to make you put in that full URL. You don't have a way to link it in. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But when you do have the opportunity to link it in a different way, I do have some recommendations on that. So it is important to use descriptive and unique link text when you are linking in a URL. The document title is a good place to start. Avoid using a link to or click here. The reason being, again, when that screen reader comes through and there's a URL there, the screen reader also creates a list of URLs on that entire page for the learner. And if you have a bunch of links that say click here, click here, click here, and there's no other descriptive text, that learner isn't going to know which one they actually need to access for a certain point of content or support. Make sure to also have links open in a new window. This makes it easier to navigate and, again, accessible for all. So just some examples here. A good example with that descriptive text would be Science with Me Caterpillars to Butterflies. And it really is just put within that sentence and linked there. A bad example would be the click here because, again, it's not really telling us where it's going. And the ugly example, as I say, is just the whole link because it's not going to be accessible for all. A tip for you for the ones that use Google Docs, you can use descriptive hyperlinks. So this has been around for a while, so you may already be familiar with this. But in Google Docs, click anywhere in a URL and you can replace it with a chip. It adds the icon and button appearance or you can choose to just do the link, but that button and icon appearance can be really helpful and an easy way to link it right in there. And also if you hover over it, it will show you a preview of the document. All right, moving on to images. We love to use images. Images are a way that we can add flair to a document, add flair to a slideshow presentation, but also a way to communicate information. Do note that in our vendor courses, the images in there have alternative text, which is something I'm going to talk about today. But when you are creating your own images, think about ways that you can add an alternative text to bring meaning to those items. So adding simple alternative text to describe the image. Again, when a screen reader comes through and is reading a document, it's also going to read an image. If there is no alternative text behind that image that you added, then what's going to happen, it will either skip it altogether, which may not be a problem if it's just decorative image, but if it is a way that you are providing information in its content, then you are going to want to make sure that there is that alternative text in there. Also, it could just say blank image as well. So when you are putting alternative text into an image, you don't need to clarify like image of or picture of. You can just add the information about the image. When a screen reader is coming through, it will already indicate that it is an image or a picture. Alternative text is not necessary for decorative images, but if you are wanting to put alt text in for any of those images, you can put decorative image or open and closed quotations is another way to put that in there. Avoid using images as the only way to convey information where possible. Lower effort to avoid this upfront, more medium effort to fix later. If you haven't been adding alternative text to your images and you use a lot of images, this may be a heavier lift. But again, like I said before, don't go back and fix everything. Start from right now. And that's a great place to start. And as you go and update things, then you can make those changes. And I just want to go back to the accessibility and the images real quick. When you are wanting to add alternative text and image, if you've never done this before, especially in a Google Doc, if you double click an image on the right-hand side, there's going to be a toolbar that pops up. At the very bottom, it's going to say alternative text. And that's where you can type in your alternative text. What you're wanting to do is just briefly describe the image and what is in there. Another thing to keep in mind, especially if you're in math, science, something like that, and you are using an image that has a lot of information in it, you are really wanting to stay 150 characters or less in your alt text. If you're not able to do that, another way to get around that is to create like a caption underneath it or something like that to provide that information. And you can even put in the alt text box like see caption below. So do keep that in mind. If you're looking for more information on alt text, I encourage you to check out the link. Also, you can Google on how to add that alt text into different programs or images. Now let's move on to chunking. So chunking really is just talking about the way we provide information to students. And again, this can be in Google Docs, in slides, any way we're providing information, in emails even. We want to provide natural breaks in content to reduce cognitive load. Sometimes we're providing so much information on a slide, on a document, in an email that we look at that page and we just glaze over and we do not actually process the information. So we are wanting to really break that information up so that it is fully processed. Using bulleted lists where helpful is going to be a great tool. Again, using those title header formatting styles, it can break it up, relieve some of that heaviness of the document. If you are looking for more about that list and cognitive web accessibility, I highly recommend you check out these links. There's a lot of information on that chunking piece, but really reducing that. I see it the most typically in documents, just very heavy and in emails. So if that's something that you feel you need to work on, think about the ways that you can shorten up, send them out to more information, put it in a bulleted list, and just really focus on the most important information. Again, if you're looking for something in regards to chunking, cognitive load theory can be really a great place to start as well. I do recommend this book, and it's just a way to talk about like processing information and when we start to give too much information to learners or people in general and how it can be difficult for them to process it. All right, the last one I have for you today is closed captioning. And the reason why I want to focus on this one today is because we do use a lot of videos. I use a lot of videos, and they can be a great way to share information with learners. But what we really need to make sure is that the videos we create and the tools that we are using are allowing us to have closed captions on those videos. Our vendors that we use, they either use closed captions or transcriptions on their videos or even their interactive activities in order for it to be accessible to learners. So the material that we create or the things that we're creating, making sure that that is there as well too. So let's talk about closed captions. Closed captions, or CC, are textual representation of the audio within a media file. They make video accessible for deaf and hard of hearing by providing a time-to-text track as a supplement to or as a substitute for the audio. If you are recording a video, ensure that you have closed caption as an option on the video. I am providing you a couple different links here if this is new to you on how to do that or ways that they're built in. One recommendation, always review your closed captions because many of them now just auto-populate, but sometimes if we're using very content-heavy jargon or wording, or even our names can sometimes come across incorrectly. And usually you can go in and edit the transcripts for those closed captions. Also, what's really important is teach learners how to use and access closed captions and the purpose. Many learners benefit from them, but the problem with it is that we don't always teach learners how to use them. There are tutorials in the Start Here folder on learners on how to use that. So I encourage you to check those out as well. So since you are watching the recording of this, what I'm going to want you to do next is go into this presentation, click on the Google Doc link. It's going to force you to make a copy of this Google Doc. And what you're going to do is I'm going to click into it here. You're going to see make a copy. And this is a sample welcome letter from a WVS teacher. And what I want you to do is I want you to go in and based on the 5 categories that I just shared with you in regards to accessibility, I want you to find any of the things that you feel are incorrect and how you would fix them. You have editing access to this because it's your copy, so you can go in and make the changes, make notes, make comments, any of those pieces. But I would like you to stop the video here, give yourself about 5 minutes or so on just going through and seeing what those changes are. And then when you're ready, you can start the video again and we'll go over what mistakes and what changes could be made. All right, welcome back. So we're going to skip this part, but even just reflect to yourself. How did you do? Did you find some mistakes? What jumped out at you right away? Were there things that were very obvious? Were there things that you know you do? And you're like, ooh, I can definitely fix that. Or was there anything that was more challenging to notice or maybe something that you missed as we go through these different pieces? So the next couple slides, I'm going to go through the pieces that we can fix in regards to accessibility. So improvement 1, using paragraph styles for titles and headers. If you look at my title here, Welcome to AP Chemistry, and then even highlight it and look what kind of text it is, it was not set as a paragraph style. All I did was I highlighted it, bolded it, made it a bigger font. What I should have done is I should have gone in, made it a heading 1, as it was my first heading, and making sure that it formatted that way. Improvement number 2, using bullet points where possible to chunk. You can see my information here is very heavy. It is very hard to read. Even this is still pretty heavy, but it definitely reduces that cognitive load compared to what was up here. So keep that in mind. Using high contrast colors. And this one probably stood out to you pretty quickly, but that bright green on the white background, definitely not accessible and hard to read. So using those high contrast colors so that it's easier for us to read. Improvement number 4, using consistent and minimal number of font types. You can see here that I used a variety of fonts. What you're wanting to do is really make sure that you're using only 1 to 2 different types of fonts, and also making sure that they are accessible in that sans serif family as well. If you clicked into my video here, you will see that there is no closed captioning. So making sure that closed captioning is on all of your videos, and thinking about that future forward as well. So thinking about what tools you use and if they have that built-in closed captioning. Also, many tools will caption them for you. It just takes a little bit of time. So I would lean on that rather than trying to caption them all yourself. But again, make sure to go back and review the captions. Improvement number 6, use other ways to emphasize key text versus just relying on color. So you can see here that I just put the text in red. That would be really difficult for a learner to access. Red and green color blindness is actually one of the highest color blindness out there. And so when we're using and relying on that red and green especially, that can be really difficult for learners to navigate and be able to access. So think about maybe we are going to italicize that, again, using that sparingly, or putting note or important information here, thinking about ways that we can be creative. Using descriptive hyperlinks is improvement number 7. You can see that in a couple spots, I did the text box for this class can be found here, and it really should be descriptive text with that link. So OpenStax Chemistry, linked that way, and then instead of just putting the entire URL, required lab materials. And this one might have been tricky to catch. What you would have seen is if you right-clicked on my image, again, it's just of me and my family, you would have seen that there is no alt text in here. Now, when describing somebody, this can be a little bit tricky. So what they do recommend is actually describing what the person looks like. So this is Larissa Zampoulis and her family. She is light skin, red hair, wearing a brown jacket and white sweater. So think about that. You don't have to describe the entire family if that's not your focus, but keeping that in mind as well. All right, so reflect on that. How did you do? Do you feel like you have a good handle on those accessibility tips? Again, where are you in this journey? Do you feel like you can make some improvements? And if so, what is something that you want to focus on this year? So again, this can be super overwhelming to think about accessibility. I did this same training with WVS admin throughout the year last year. And what I said to them is the same I'm going to say to you. Pick one thing that you can really focus on and change throughout the year. So whether that's links, whatever, if that's text, just one thing you can change going future forward. As you start editing old documents, you can make those changes too, but don't try to go back and fix everything. We just want to continue to think about accessibility and making sure we're making access for all. And if you are struggling with something, or if you want support in making something accessible that you have or you want to create, please reach out to me personally. I am more than happy to do that. And if you felt like this was super interesting and you're ready to take on more, Mary Tunison and I will be doing a medium high effort tips for accessibility on August 7th. It is a virtual from 12 to 1. Feel free to join us on that Zoom link. It is on the WVS events calendar as well. And if you found any of this interesting or would like to dig in a little bit more, here's some additional resources for you. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to help you in anything in regards to access and accessibility and would be happy to assist. Have a wonderful school year.